creepy and geeky. Welcome to the Double Feature Podcast of Horror and More. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, we're exploring the wild world of Stephen King movies, specifically Maximum Overdrive and Sleepwalkers. Joining me on this journey is Kevin Uhrich. Kevin is a contributor to Neon Splatter, Horror Facts, and Film Cred, and the host of the Video Confidential podcast. Welcome back to the show, Kevin.
Well, thank you for having me to talk about two amazing movies.
Most people don't give it the amazing credit, but I agree with you. I think they're awesome.
It's a blanket term, I'll say. That's the best way to describe it.
I think they are. I think they are. They are fun movies. Yeah, I like them. You know, just get that out of the way. I enjoy the movies. So we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about that. But first up, what was your first horror movie?
My first was it's one of those things. I have a tenuous memory of seeing The Thing when I was about 3 or 4. It's a toss up between that or American Werewolf in London. Like those two are kind of like, I feel like around the same time. My dad just had those on TV and just was like, oh, that's fine. My children can watch these movies. That's fine. So it's like I'm the baby of the family. So it's like, oh, let's put the smallest child right dead center to watch, you know, a man's head turn into a spider or a young man turn into a giant werewolf, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my experience with horror was, I mean, I started with 2 classics, so that's something.
Yeah.
But those would probably be the earliest.
Did that make you a lifelong horror fan at that moment, or was it a gradual thing that came up later?
It actually kind of made me more afraid of horror for a long time.
Right.
Like, well, no, I shouldn't say a long time, but around the time when, like I said, I'm the baby. My brother is a few years older than me, and the thing of it was he had older friends, so he would go to their house and they would watch horror movies and stuff like that. And then my parents were pretty cool with us, like what we rented,
right,
as long as it wasn't like, you know, extreme violence, and it was like as long as none of us were going out and renting Faces of Death or something like that, they were like, it's fine, rent whatever. So my brother would rent horror movies a lot, and so I would always, this is the memory I always remember. It's if he put on a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I was out of the room in a flash because Freddy Krueger scared me to death, and I was just like, nope. Anytime a New Line Cinema logo came on the TV, I was out. I was waiting until whatever movie started. If it was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I was waiting till I saw those turtles on the screen for sure, and then I knew I was safe. But if it was like I see that logo coming, I'm like, I'm out. Freddy Krueger's right behind that thing. He's going to kill me. I'm like, so it was a long time. But kind of what helped me bridge the gap into horror was the Monster Squad. That kind of helped me realize like horror movies don't always have to be like nonstop scares. You can have your fun moments and things like that. And it felt like with that movie, it helped that it was kids that were older than me, but not, you know, drastically, but it was something that really made me go, okay, if they can handle like real life monsters, quote unquote, real life monsters, then I can handle watching monster movies on TV. And so that kind of led me to discover like the you know, the quote unquote classics, like, you know, Friday the 13th and Halloween. And eventually I did bridge the gap and finally watch Nightmare on Elm Street, all that franchise. I had a thing where I would watch every franchise like all the way through from beginning to end. So it would just be like, all right, I rented Friday the 13th 1, gonna go rent 2, then 3, then 4, and just go through all of them. Same with Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street. And it was just like, okay, I can, you know, finally it kind of helped me realize like, oh, horror is cool, like it's fun. And it made me appreciate a lot of a lot of interesting and different horror movies that I wouldn't have probably seen had I not finally kind of broken away from that fear and been like, I can finally do this.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I understand completely. Yeah. Um, yeah, being a child of the 80s, I was exposed to it pretty early on, and got to watch it as I went along. My parents weren't too restrictive either. So
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of that I mean, I'm more of a 90s kid, but
right.
I mean, my brother was born in 82, so he was, he kind of had that, and with him my parents were like, oh, we're not going to really put too much of a whole a hold on what he's going to see, but they would always tell
Right.
us like, what you're seeing is not real, don't worry, don't be
Yeah.
scared, these things aren't real. But that didn't always stop them from going like, hey, if you don't brush your teeth, we're calling Freddy Krueger to come in.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, and even though you didn't believe in it quite all the way, you still believed in it just enough for that to
yeah,
work.
my fear was that strong that I was like, I don't know if you're telling the truth, but I'll be cautious. I'll go brush my teeth.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. All right. Well, let's jump right into our first movie. We're gonna start with Maximum Overdrive, which is Stephen King's only um, uh, movie that he directed. It's very loosely based on his short story Trucks, but I mean, and very loosely at that. He went off in a huge different direction. They eventually did do a straight up adaptation of Trucks as a TV movie, and it just was not good. So it was.
I've seen that as well, and it's it's no Maximum Overdrive. That's for
No,
sure.
and that's the thing. Like, as much as Maximum Overdrive is this wild, crazy movie and everything like that, it just works somehow. As long as you understand going in that this is Stephen King at his most cocaine fueled.
Oh yes.
And like literally, he was so high on cocaine. There were times where apparently he doesn't even remember making this movie at all.
Yeah,
which is
and
nuts. So
that's such a fascinating, like, weird side tangent in Stephen King's career. Like,
yeah,
as I mean, with mentioning the horror thing, it's an odd thing. I was scared of horror, but I grew up kind of like admiring Stephen King
yeah,
because I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, I make this joke that I think my Stephen King fandom was passed to me in the womb, because when my mom was pregnant with me, that Christmas she bought my dad It, and he read the entire book on Christmas Day, just in one sitting. Was just like, no,
wow,
I'm just gonna sit here and do, I'm sure he was just like, I'm tired from putting all of these toys together for my older brother and sister and all this other stuff. I think he was just like, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to maybe pound a few beers, and I'm going to read this book. And he read it all the way through in one day. And then my mom read it too, which is always a fascinating thing to be like, to me, because she's never struck me as like a huge King fan. But I think that
right,
book, it was kind of that book where it was like, all right, we're going to really, like, just kind of, it's going to grab everybody. Like, it's the Stephen King book I think that everybody knows right out of the gate, where they're like, oh,
right,
Stephen King, the guy who wrote It, or Carrie, or but she read that too, so it was just kind of one of those things, like, it passed through me by osmosis, and I was born to read Stephen King, and it's just so it's one of those things too. Just I remember this movie so well. Like, it's such a it was a frequent TBS watch,
yeah.
and
I was
like
gonna say this
the
one was
mid to, like,
frequently on cable.
yeah,
So
this was like 1995 to 1998. This was on TBS, like, on a consecutive loop in the summer. I swear to God, because it'd be like, all right, well, I'm not going outside. It's too hot. What am I gonna put on TV? Oh, Maximum Overdrive's on again. So, and then it'd be like, oh, I'm gonna watch Monster Vision tonight. What's on Monster Vision? Oh, it's Maximum Overdrive. Joe Bob's talking about it. Granted,
That's funny.
it's a whole other thing when you watch it on cable than when you actually see it
Oh yeah.
on, video or Blu-ray, whatever. I mean, I haven't bought it yet, but I think I would like to buy the what is it, the Vestron
The Vestron Video Collector
special,
Series. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
special
that's what I
edition of
have.
that,
Yeah.
because that looks amazing, and I'm sure that's
Yeah.
just, those Blu-rays put so many amazing special features in that
Oh
it's like
yeah.
I gotta watch it.
Yeah, I haven't
But
even dived into the special features on it, but I definitely have watched the movie a couple of times on that disc. It's a good disc.
as long as it has that
Yeah.
amazing trailer, that's all I care about.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's definitely got that trailer. Yeah. Oh man. So that
I'm gonna scare
trailer,
the hell out of you.
that trailer is something else too. Like rarely do you have somebody like one of the filmmakers talking to you, let alone the person, let alone Stephen King talking directly to you, talking about how like all these other adaptations that have been made from his books and everything. He's like, well, when you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. I don't know, Stephen King, you kind of didn't do it right.
Yeah,
But you kind of did at the same time. That's what's so amazing about this movie is just
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
one of the most batshit crazy movies that shouldn't work at all, but yet somehow really does. And a lot of it, I think is really just everybody going along, everybody committing to this idea, because everybody in this movie is playing like super over the top,
Oh yeah.
and having so much fun. That at least they look like they're having so much fun. I don't know how much fun they were actually having,
Yeah, I don't
because
know.
who knows what Stephen King was like as this coke fueled
Well, I
director.
mean, maybe he was passing it around, maybe he
Yeah,
was just like,
maybe.
hey, we're having a great day. Let's all do a couple rails. All right.
Oh, I know
Even though
there's
I think,
some. Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh
I
no,
was
I
just
was just
saying,
gonna.
oh,
You go first.
I was just saying, like, then again, thinking about it, like, maybe not so much with Emilio. His performance in this is the more subdued one, I'd say, out of
Yeah,
like everybody else.
yeah, yeah. He's
So maybe
playing
he
it
was just like,
way
I'll
under where
pass.
everybody else is playing it way over.
Yeah. Maybe he was learning his. I mean,
It's the
this is kind of
early
on
for
his
him.
down. This is like kind of on his downer, not down, but
Oh
he's
yeah,
like,
no
because he has like, he's coming off of Saint Elmo's Fire and Breakfast Club and stuff like that.
Breakfast
Because
Club.
after
Yeah,
this, it's Stakeout. Then he kind of comes back up. He's got Young Guns. So
yeah.
then it's like back down. He has a movie I think is actually really funny, Loaded Weapon One,
Oh,
not
I love
Weapons,
Loaded
Loaded Weapon. But
Weapon.
it's
That
such a
movie's
good
hilarious.
movie that
Yeah,
and obviously it was a box office bomb at the time, but
yeah.
reappraisals, thank you. It's
Yep.
it's a great
There you
movie.
go.
But this,
Same with
yeah,
same with Maximum Overdrive.
yeah,
That's
time will tell.
time will
Always.
tell. Yeah, no, I think this one's interesting too, because there's a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of discussion over the years too, of there's like, I guess there's a couple of sequences where people are like, I don't know, this looks like maybe better than what Stephen King is doing through most of the rest of the movie, because people know that George Romero was on set.
Mm.
And so a lot of people pointed out, going, okay, well, this one sequence looks very George Romero-ish. And
So
so
they're
here's the thing, though, and this is what I want to argue about this, is that I don't think George Romero directed any of it. I think that Stephen King had George Romero on the set a lot and was asking him, hey, what would you do in this situation? And then did it that way, so that way it's going to look very much like what Romero did, because that's what Stephen King is doing. Stephen King is taking what he's saying and making it happen. So
oh,
yes,
I could, yeah,
there's some
I'd
Romero
absolutely
guiding
believe
it.
that.
Yeah,
It's
but
yeah,
I
it's
don't
so
think
it's
Romero would have like come up and like directed any of it.
yeah, it's like it's the, oh, did Spielberg direct Poltergeist argument all
Yeah,
over again, but
yeah,
on
exactly.
a slightly lesser scale, I would say, because it's
Yeah,
like, hey, we're getting a first time director, not a director who's already, proven himself with movies like, oh, I don't know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
a guy who's actually come up and Salem's Lot, speaking of Stephen King, he's,
yeah, yeah.
Bradley Hooper's proven himself. I think he doesn't need Steven Spielberg to come in and be like, now Toby, we're gonna do it
No,
this way. And it's like, no, I think I got it, Steve. You stay
no,
back
and I
and
think
produce.
the argument. the argument with the poltergeist thing, like, don't get me wrong, I do believe that Steven Spielberg had a guiding hand in that, like he has in all of the projects that he's a producer on, because he's a producer. Like, as a producer, he's going to be very much in control of a lot of that. And most of the directors that he works with are going to be open to that. And you know, and so I can see, but that's what's crazy about Poltergeist, is it very much feels like a a horror movie that Steven Spielberg definitely has some input into, but is definitely somebody else's work. Because I just don't know if Steven Spielberg could pull it off quite the same way. I think it would have been a little bit more different. So
yeah, they might have been a little bit, maybe a bit more treacly and sweet, just a little bit more. Because with Hooper, you get a bit of a harder edge with some stuff. I mean, I think Spielberg had the story credit too for Poltergeist, right? So that's kind of so that might be more of like.
So that's where the flavor comes in from that. Yeah,
like of a Spielberg film comes in, because he's like, I came up with this idea and that idea.
Yeah,
that's about it.
And he was on set too. So and Toby was probably like, hey, how would you do this? So it's like, it's kind of like that shared, and that's where I think that the same thing with Maximum Overdrive comes in, is that, and some people say that, the reason why is because Stephen King was so coked out of his mind that maybe he missed a day or two, and they were just like, hey, George, come in here, like, help direct these. And okay, so if he did, he did. I'm not saying that he didn't, but I'm saying more than likely it is just Stephen King asking for Romero's like guidance and opinions on certain things. That's how I've always felt about it. So
yeah, absolutely. I could see that more as like
because they were friends.
Yeah, like a mentor friendship relationship, where it's like, well, George, I'm thinking about doing this, and maybe he'd be like, well, Steven, maybe try it this way. Try it your way, but maybe try it this way too, or something like that. Because I'm sure they were. I almost guarantee they were blowing through money, because this is a Dino De Laurentiis production. So he's just like, throw money at the problem. It's fine. Oh, what's that? Most of the money's going towards Steven's habit. It's fine. It'll be great.
Yeah, no, it's well, and here's the thing, like, I am not gonna and that's another funny aspect of this movie, is that him making this with De Laurentiis is what helped get Evil Dead 2 made, because Stephen King was like, hey, let's get these guys a sequel made, because he loved the first Evil Dead. And they've credited him for like helping them get that off the ground, and getting them in contact with De Laurentiis. So I will go to my grave and thanking Stephen King, coked up Stephen King on Maximum Overdrive for getting Evil Dead 2 made. So
absolutely, God bless the man. He's helped lead to so many horror franchises. I mean, having him. I mean, granted, it's more a blurb for the book, but when they put that, I've seen the future of horror and his name is Clive Barker on the front of Hellraiser's trailer, I feel like people were like, well, I got to see this now. And that led to
exactly
so many things. Like, his name carries so much power and weight to it. It's just like, you can't throw a stone and not hit somebody who's like, oh, Stephen King made that happen,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no,
I mean, especially
and that
in
goes,
the next movie we'll be talking about. He kind of
yeah, that goes into something you said before about you've always known Stephen King to be in your life, and I think anybody who was grew up in the 80s and later, but especially the 80s and 90s, Stephen King was this omnipresent entity. He was always around. Like, the books and the movies and everything were so larger than life. He was literally the master of horror for so long, and still is in so many ways. He still carries that weight. He's like this godfather of horror. Like, I feel like he's kind of tapered off, and he kind of ebbs and flows now. But in the 80s and 90s, it was just like, he was just so big, so huge, that it was insane how much his name could carry anything. I mean, there were some terrible movies made from his books,
Oh,
but
for sure. Yeah.
he but he did so good. Like, it didn't matter that sometimes that they were terrible, you still went and watch them because you're just like, oh, they suck, but they'll be all right.
Yeah, I
So
mean, at this point, I mean, we're on another remake of Children of the Corn, and we've
yeah,
already
yeah, I just saw that.
it's like, Jesus, God in heaven, how many versions of that story can we tell? Like, I've seen the first one, I've seen the first three of that original franchise, and I haven't seen any since then. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Like, I'll watch Children of the Corn Urban Harvest before I watch another remake of Children of the Corn.
Now, see, I haven't watched any of the Children of the Corn series yet. So that's eventually I'm going to get around to number one, the original.
It's
But
it's okay. I'll say that.
yeah, yeah. I'm not expecting much. I've heard, that it's okay. Yeah, very much
Yeah.
that it's okay. But I am interested though in a modern reinterpretation of it, just because they might be able to do something good with it. You never know. I mean, it could be
Yeah.
it could be an It style thing, or it could be a new Pet Cemetery. You never know. Although I have heard the new Pet Cemetery isn't terrible either. It's just different. So
yeah, that's the best way to put it. It's different. It's not
yeah,
I saw it once. I don't really need to see it again. I'm okay
yeah,
without, but honestly, I'm gonna say it. Pet Cemetery isn't even one of my top, like, in the King adaptations as far as
no,
movies go.
same.
It's okay. Like, I like the book
Yeah,
way more because I feel
yeah.
like
The book is
I
fucking
mean, the book
dark.
obviously hits those personal dark
Yeah,
moments and everything, but um I mean, I like Pet Cemetery too, I think, more than Pet Cemetery, just because it goes so bizarre that I'm just like, I
right.
gotta watch this again and again. Because Clancy Brown going full
Yeah.
tilt insane, going kind of half Kurgan. I'm in for that. So
Yeah, I need to rewatch number two. It's been years, probably since it came out, that I've watched it. I own it on the Scream Factory disc. I just haven't watched it yet.
oh yeah,
But yeah, it's one of those ones that's eternally on my list to eventually watch. But
go for
but
it.
yeah,
Just
um,
do it tonight if you have to.
but yeah, I feel the same about the original Pet Cemetery. It's okay. I don't consider it one of his classics at all. Like, I think that it's fine, and that but the book is way better, way darker,
Mhm.
and hits harder than the movie ever will.
Well, and I think now that kind of I'll loop it back into Maximum Overdrive a little
Yeah,
bit, because King wrote that screenplay as well. And I think the
yeah,
thing with King as a screenwriter is he's good at adapting his works to a
yes.
degree, but he needs to kind of trim some of the fat in some areas. Like, I think the
That's
thing
Stephen King
with that,
to a T.
well, yeah, especially this era of Stephen King, but it's
Yeah,
like I feel like he's trying to write scripts as if they're right as if he's writing his books. Because it feels
right.
like he's writing these scripts and it's almost like, all right, this is the character's inner monologue, or this is what they're feeling at this moment. And it's like, well, Steve, you have to convey that on the screen as much as possible too. You can't just be like, all right, well, this character is actually he's on parole, so this is happening, and this is what he's feeling at this moment. And it's like, again, Steve, you've got to convey that on the screen as
Yeah,
quickly as possible. We're in a movie here, like we're
yeah,
snap snap here.
yeah. No, I agree. I think that his screenwriting can be hit or miss for sure. Um, and I think that you see this in Maximum Overdrive. You know, he again, I really don't think Maximum Overdrive is really that bad. I think that what we're getting in Maximum Overdrive is really what he meant to do. No matter if he was coked up or not, I think he was going for that old school, because this is what he really likes, is that EC Comics, old 50s like movie style, like
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And so this is what this movie reminds me of, is just something, a very loose thing to get the trucks moving. And that's
Yeah.
all it is. It was, the Earth passes into the tail of a comet. That apparently the aliens are actually, there is a whole UFO alien aspect to
Yeah,
all
that's
this.
that part is like the part I always chuckle at, where I'm like, it's like, well, Steve, maybe you should have tried to take some cues from George, because, well, this, yeah, the same thing you were kind of saying is like, this feels in a way kind of Night of the Living Dead-esque, and instead
Yeah,
of zombies we have trucks and cars and this and that, and we're trying to essentially survive the night.
yeah,
um but it kind of, yeah, it feels like he's trying to go into an over explanation of things, where it's like, Steve, you saw Night of the Living Dead. You're best friends with its director. Remember
yeah,
how in Night of the Living Dead they're like, well, this may be what's causing it, or this or that, and it's like, instead he's kind of just definitively saying like, well, this comet is
yeah.
part of kind of an alien invasion that's happening. That's like, we're sweeping out the humans, and it's like, all right, I'll go with it, just because you're so damn
Right.
charming with your characters that I you've got Emilio Estevez rocking that white shirt all the time.
Oh man. Yeah. No, but yeah, I think that's what he was going for. I think he was going for that vibe. And I think that overall he kind of succeeds at it. He's got these broad characters, this very loose version of a hero.
Mhm.
This guy who's a criminal of some sort, who steps up to be the hero everybody needs.
Yeah.
Um because
Who is
everybody else
constantly
is.
called hero by his love interest. Don't forget
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I never
Yeah,
saw a
the
hero with his
girl
ass
who
in the
he
air
licks
like
the
that.
sweat off of, um, which was apparently an ad lib by Emilio Estevez in the moment, and they just
Okay.
went with it and kept it in the film, which is just such a weird thing. It's like, you,
Well,
um,
it's Stephen King just going like, yeah, I guess that'll work. Well, let me
yeah,
let me go do a quick bump. I'll say if it works or not.
yeah, yeah. It's so it's very funny. Like Pat Hingle's in this. He's playing the owner of the truck stop, the Dixie Boy. And
Yes,
he's
I
playing it
love that
way over
sign.
the top. Oh man, he's great in this. He's so over the top, calling everybody Bubba.
Yeah,
Um, has
that
license
that
plate Bubba.
very, yeah, that southern fried
Yeah,
accent he's got on. He's doing the kind of the Jackie Gleason
yeah,
in Smokey and the Bandit, just like a little
yeah.
bit, just kind of like, oh yeah, let's just go for it. I'm going over the top as much as possible. Smoking my big fat stogie,
Oh
shooting
man,
a
yeah,
rocket launcher.
shooting a rocket launcher. Yeah, just willy nilly. It doesn't matter who's behind him or anything like that. He's just shooting rocket launchers at people or at the
Yeah,
trucks.
why
Yeah,
not?
and it's yeah,
They're
and
attacking his business.
and then the weirdest part of this is we basically have live action Lisa Simpson in this movie.
Yeah,
With
that was a
actually
big draw when I was a kid, because I was a huge Simpsons fan, and
oh
just
yeah, yeah,
seeing Yardley Smith in real life,
yeah.
and just hearing the voice coming out of the actual person makes me go like, "Oh, that's so weird, but so cool at the same time." It's like
It
when I
would
saw
be
the Twilight Zone movie and I saw Nancy Cartwright, and I'm like, "Oh, it's Bart Simpson." Okay.
it would. I think it'd be cooler if it weren't for the fact that she's constantly yelling throughout the whole movie. She's Curtis,
Yeah.
Curtis the whole time, and it's just like,
I'm gonna lose my cookies.
oh, so annoying. It's like the worst part of Lisa Simpson.
Yes.
But because she's got a very distinctive voice. Her voice is Lisa Simpson. They like she doesn't do anything to her voice to be Lisa, and so
No. Yeah,
it's
just like I think
it's
she said she
just
raises it
literally
slightly, just very
yeah,
slightly.
yeah. And so it's literally just like, yeah, like you said, it's weird like that it's coming out of this regular person the whole time. It's almost like somebody's like imitating her the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's
Because
just like
yeah,
it's
because
so
this
weird.
and the Legend of Billie Jean are the two things I always remember. I associate her with live action,
Oh,
and
that's
it's
funny.
always like she's just doing kind of the same thing in that. She's a
Yeah,
screaming, hysterical character to a degree, and then you focus on the other characters, so
yeah,
we don't have
yeah,
to hear the yelling as much.
yeah. But
And
yeah, it's
her husband
it's
too. Oh my god, the
yeah,
we gotta
Curtis.
stop.
Yeah,
I gotta use the bathroom. Can I
yeah,
watch? It's like, Curtis, let's take it down.
Well, what's funny, what struck me this time was he weirdly has, I don't know, like his face reminded me of a young Haley Joel Osment. And so it was driving me nuts the whole time because I was just like, it just looks weird because now you see Haley Joel Osment and he's older and he's he's heavier and with a beard and everything. But this is like if Haley Joel Osment had grown up and still was skinny and uh, uh, didn't have a beard, didn't have a beard at all. And so it's just so weird to see him see this actor who's like this, and it tripped me up the whole time. I was like, that's so odd.
It. Like, yeah, oh, it does look like Haley Joel Osment. Oh my god.
It really does. It's weird. But it's so funny too, because in the beginning he's just like, he's freaking out just as much as she is, and then like he teams up with Emilio's character to go through the sewers, and then they like, I don't know, he turns out all badass after that point. He's like carrying a gun and just being like, all macho and shit. With
you guys to fill up these trucks during the during that montage.
Yeah,
which that's one of the things I is taken from the short story. The constant like, okay, we're filling up the trucks, and then the tanker comes so they can refill, and then which is a nice, like, that's kind of if a different person had written it, or they would have come in with a different tone and played that a bit more in the horrifying sense, I think.
Yeah.
Or I'd just be like that dawning realization, like, oh no, they do have fuel tankers. Why didn't I think of this?
Yeah.
But with Stephen King, it's just like an oh shit moment. Like, damn it.
Well, I think it's funny too, because there's a lot of people who like try to like, there are inconsistencies. Don't get me wrong. There are some cars that aren't taken over or anything. Connie and Curtis's car make it all the way. They're perfectly fine without ever having been taken over or anything. So it's weird. There is some inconsistencies, and that's just something that I think is that's a part of the story, because like I think maybe if there was something that was mentioned, that maybe not all machines are taken over, just most, but some somehow don't do it.
I was gonna say, if you're and theorizing that too, it's like, well, the army Jeep that comes has a machine gun on it.
Yeah,
that machine gun. They're all wielding machine guns and rocket launchers at some point. Those are technically complex machines.
Yeah. Well, like, and that's what the funny thing is.
Where they're Sorry, I'm just thinking about the one scene because it just made me think of it too when we were talking about pumping up the I can't think of the character's name, but he's the father of was it Deke, the little kid, and he's just like he's fueling up the Green Goblin truck, and then it's just like, stopped, the diesel stopped. Let me look down the nozzle. It's like, dear God.
Yeah.
Why? Well, I know why. It's a movie, but at the same time.
Yeah. It's like, what's gonna happen. Come on, man. But no, it's that was funny too, because a lot of people will complain about how the one little platform with the machine gun drives up and starts shooting, and people have a problem with that, because they're like, well, that shouldn't happen because somebody's got to handle the gun to make it shoot. I was like, yeah, but somebody would have to handle the knife that cut the waitress's arm too to make that work. So like, you got to let go, man. You got to go with it and just let it go and just enjoy it for the campy like craziness that it really is.
I mean, you're seeing the soda machine kill a man, so that's
that's one of my favorite parts, though. I mean, really come on, that is just a great kill. That is just one of
it plays so perfectly too, because it's just like you start off and it hits him in the stomach, and you hear the kid laughing, and then it hits him again, and then all of a sudden it makes that turn where it's just like, oh no, this is gonna end badly, and then bam, hits the one right dead in the center of his head, and it's like, you hear the crack and everything. It's like, yeah, this took that really creepy turn, and then the steamroller runs over that kid.
The steamroller. Well, and apparently they cut out a part of that because they had put down this, I guess, bag filled with the fake blood or whatever, so that it would create a so that you would get the scene of it rolling over the kid, and there'd be this splatter, and then the steamroller would keep going through the grass, and you'd see red blood stain through the grass as it went along. And so it was supposed to be this fun visual and everything. But apparently, when they were filming it, the splatter made it look like the kid's head exploded basically once he was rolled over. And I guess the censors were like, yeah, no, that's a little too much. I was like, it's not a little too much that they ran over the kid in the first place, but
seeing the head explode is a whole other thing, Stephen. We're sorry, but
but yeah, it's, I don't know, this movie, I like, I enjoyed this movie a lot. I always have, like, ever since I watched it back in the 80s. It's one of those movies that's just, it's really, I can admit, yes, it's not the best movie, but if you give yourself over to it, it's a lot better than a lot of other terrible movies that people consider really good too. And I'm like, okay, there's a lot more terrible movies that people love that are
absolutely, and
Maximum Overdrive is so much better.
And even going into Stephen King adaptations, where this is a good one in comparison to a lot of
like Graveyard Shift or something like that.
Yeah, Graveyard Shift, the TV adaptation of The Shining, which has some good moments, I will say, but overall it's just, we're never going to touch the the original desperation. Like, granted, we're diving into the TV stuff, but still, Cat's Eye. I'm not a big Cat's Eye person. That's kind of,
I liked Cat's Eye. That was one of the ones I thought was okay. It's been years since I've seen it, though. So
I think Quitters Inc. I think is the only one I really like out of that, but that's just because I like that story too. I think it's a cool
right.
But yeah, this is definitely like one of those movies where if I hate that saying, but it is you just shut off your brain, for the time, and just enjoy yourself. Like, I mean, now I don't know if you know this, Robert. The entire score was done by AC/DC.
Oh yes, yes.
You. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
A big surprise. I don't know if you could tell by that screeching guitar psycho riff whenever the Green Goblin truck would show up.
Oh man, that was great. That's perfect. Every time the Green Goblin truck tries to is going after somebody, that it's like great. It's like his version of like Bernard Herrmann's psycho theme, just that.
I'm sure he was just like, I want to go for that, but like a hard rock version of that. And it's like, all right, you're the boss, you're paying the bills. So.
Absolutely.
I mean, this
and I think overall
could just be like, oh, this is just literally one AC/DC album that we took and just I mean, it is mostly Back in Black, so
yeah. It's mostly a compilation album. They do they do contribute a new song, that Who Made Who song, and I think overall their contribution is pretty good. Like they had a good touch to the movie.
It adds to the
idea,
like that you were saying, like Stephen King knows what he's going for here, where he's like,
I
just want to make a fun, easy, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror type of story. That's, he's like, I'm sure he was like, I already wrote the more serious version of this. It's the short story. Go read it.
Right.
I want to have fun and make a weird, like, I want to make them, but with trucks.
yeah. No, and I think that's I think that what he did is fairly successful, and and I think that it gets a lot of shit put on it because it doesn't really match what other people think is a good movie. But I still think it's good. I'll go to my grave claiming Maximum Overdrive is a good movie overall. So
I have a fun time with it, and that's all I care about if I'm watching a movie.
Exactly.
And, if I'm enjoying myself start to finish, then you know what, that's good enough for me. It doesn't have to be high caliber art. I don't get me wrong. I'll watch Academy Award fare and this and that. And the more heavy dramas and things like that. But sometimes I just want to see some crazy over the top. I want to see an arcade machine electrocute somebody to death.
Giancarlo Esposito, to be exact.
One of his earliest roles.
One of his earliest roles.
Like third, right after right after Trading Places, probably. Like
Yeah.
he's working his way up to do the right thing. So
Yeah. Yeah,
but
it's yeah, no, I agree. It's a fun movie. Just shut your brain off, watch the movie, and enjoy the insanity of it all. It's just too fun. It's
yeah, you can't go in expecting this to be like something super serious when you have
right.
when you start out the movie, and you see Stephen King himself at an ATM machine, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
all right, I know what I'm seeing now, and
Yeah. I
and you
miss that
see,
era of the Stephen King cameo in his movies. Like I know he did it in It Part 2. But
mhm,
it's so that was a welcome thing. So it's nice to see him, doing that,
yeah,
especially
it's
these
always nice
funny
to,
ones, because there's this one, and in the next movie we're going to be talking about in Sleepwalkers, he's got a really great fun cameo as well. So
yeah, when he's having fun, it's great. Like this and Sleepwalkers and in Storm of the Century when he's just
yeah.
he's doing his little bits there. It's like when he's having fun, that's the kind of Stephen King cameo I love. When it's just like
Yeah, exactly.
he's goofing off.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and jump into Sleepwalkers, which was not directed by him, but was written by him. It's
Yes.
one of the. This one was not based on anything. I'm pretty sure this was his only. Until he did TV later. Up until
Mhm.
this point, this was his only screenplay that he wrote that was not a book or short story originally, and has never
Yeah,
been
and
made into a short story or book.
yeah, that's kind of interesting when you think about it.
Yeah,
When you're just like, oh well, this is the guy whose novels are like the basis for so many, films and TV adaptations that you're thinking like, oh, this has to be from something. You look back through all of his works, and I mean,
yep.
granted, he probably still has a ton of unpublished stuff that
Oh, a
is
ton.
is
Yeah,
probably a treasure trove of like amazing stories. But I'm sure this was like an idea he kicked around like a long time and was like, it's not going to work as a story or a novel. I think I have to do this as a movie, and so it's definitely a wholly original concept that it.
yes,
I mean,
yeah.
I'd read this if it were a book or short
Oh,
story, and
definitely. Yeah, I think it'd be a fun, to a degree. I think it depends on how he approaches it. This one has this one's wild all on its own. It's
yes,
definitely not as nuts as Maximum Overdrive is, but this one has some, you know, like
yeah, this
wild
one.
ideas to it.
Yeah,
Um,
this one kind of it's a movie that takes more of a turn, I'd say. Like when
yeah.
it starts out a bit more somber, and
Yeah.
then it takes that crazy turn around like the halfway point where you're like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
I'm in for this. Like, because it's yeah, when this movie
I
starts
think once
out,
you buy into it, you're in. Yeah.
yeah, it's a
As
very
long
it's
as you
like
yeah.
yeah. Like you come into it and you're just like, okay, this is like it almost feels like a serial killer, like a true crime thing at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like you're seeing like, oh, this is kind of a Ted Bundy or Ed
Right.
Gein type figure who's just like, oh, he's gonna charm his way into this girl's life, and then all of a sudden it takes that turn. But I mean, you see some supernatural stuff leading into it,
Yeah.
obviously, but I mean, I I remember renting. Well, I didn't rent this movie. I had a friend who he would visit his grandparents, and we would always rent movies and watch them and stuff like that. So he rented this one day, and we were watching it. And we were just like, "This is bananas! Like this is so insane! Like seeing seeing cat people
Yeah.
is the best way to put it. They're not cat people in the Paul Schrader or Val Lewton sense, but they're cat people,
Right. Yeah. No, so I think that's what's interesting. Like you said, this one, is fairly normal-ish and then turns on a dime. And that was something that goes into what I just found out about Mick Garris, who's the person who directed this movie. This was his first studio picture. This was his first collaboration with Stephen King, and they would go on to do several collaborations, including the TV version of The Stand, the first TV version of The Stand, and like you mentioned earlier, the TV version of The Shining.
Yep.
So
and Desperation.
And Desperation.
Riding the Bullet.
I
will say Riding the Bullet is a very good adaptation. If you haven't seen it, I don't know, but it's underrated. It's an underrated adaptation of that story, and it's handled really well, but it has fun elements to it. So
that's good. Yeah. And the original Stand miniseries is good too. That's definitely a high watermark for me.
I couldn't compare it yet.
I wouldn't bother. I wish I hadn't.
That's generally what I've heard.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Don't get me wrong, it's not terrible, but they do some funky stuff with it that just doesn't make sense. And so I appreciate, like, the new one has Alexander Skarsgård as Randall Flagg in it, which I like him more than I like Jamie Sheridan. Jamie Sheridan never connected with me. Like, I didn't see him as being very Flagg-like. So yeah.
I mean, I'd say he had like the kind of the charm, a little bit of Flagg.
Yeah.
But when it came to being menacing,
he didn't seem to have the menace.
He couldn't pull that one off. And with Alexander Skarsgård, I can see both. I can see both sides of that. And he's got that, just like, oh, hey, how are you doing? I'm super attractive, Alexander Skarsgård. Pleased to meet you. And then all of a sudden, he can turn on a dime.
Yeah. No, he does a really good job.
Straw Dogs remake, I know.
Yeah. No, he's definitely the high point for that remake series. There's a couple more good parts of here and there about it, but I think overall it's unless
sure
you're
James
hyped about it.
Quite high.
Oh, I think James Marsden's one of the best actors. I think, like, he's this weird person who should be much bigger in Hollywood, and it just has never connected for some reason. He does good work, and he gets good work.
He's very charming. He's got that. He can sing, he can dance, he's got everything, and it's just kind of like nobody knows how to utilize that just yet. They were like, you're gonna be Cyclops, and then we're gonna take you out of like most of the other movies, and then kill you off in one of them. And or we're gonna make you the host of the dance show in the Hairspray remake. It's kind of just like like little bits.
But he's great in that. I will give him that. Like, he's really great in Hairspray. So.
And then TV's been kind of his bread and butter with Westworld and Dead to Me. And I think he's on Party Down now. He's on I haven't watched it yet, but he's on the new season of Party Down. So
that's funny.
But I love James Marsden. He deserves so much more. I remember him in Disturbing Behavior, and he just never took off from that.
Yeah, he never took off, and it's just the weirdest thing. But going back to Sleepwalkers, like, I remember seeing this. I don't know if I saw. I think I saw this in the theater when it came out, because this came out in '92, and I was 18 at the time. Or that was the year I turned 18. So I can kind of vaguely remember having seen this in the theater, because at that point I was a big Stephen King fan. I'd gotten into Stephen King like right around early high school. And so I started reading a bunch of his stuff and devouring everything that I could get. And so when this came out, I was like, oh, cool. A Stephen King movie, like an original thing. This should be cool. This looks awesome. Cat people, because they lay it out in the trailer for you. And so I was just like, okay, this is very cool. So, and I remember watching it, and just I loved it. It's probably one of my favorite Stephen King things ever, as silly as and weird as it is. Because, like, there's this mother and son, for the audience who's listening, there's this mother and son vampire. They're vampires, but they also are kind of weird cat-like creatures. They are called Sleepwalkers. You're given this little blurb in the very beginning, and apparently this was something that Mick Garris added to the movie. to kind of, clue the audience into what this is. But they are basically what vampires themselves are based on. Sleepwalkers are these creatures that can shapeshift into these cat-like creatures, and they don't suck blood, they suck your life force out.
Yes.
And but
which is the great beginning. That scene with Mark Hamill is just
yes, yeah. Uncredited. Mick Garris just said, hey, you want to do this bit? I guess they had to do that in reshoots. And Mark Hamill's like, sure, yeah, why not? Because apparently Mick Garris had worked, one of his first jobs was working as a receptionist for Lucasfilm during the making of the original Star Wars. So he met,
you build up.
Yeah, he met Mark and they became friends over the years, and they he was just like, hey, would you like to come over and do this weird little scene with me? We'll slap on a big mustache and people won't recognize you as well. Yeah. But yeah, that's
what you're saying. They're energy vampires that they suck the life force out of, I guess it's supposed to be kind of innocent.
Yeah, innocent virginal teens. Yeah, like I guess teen women. So teen girls. And so they the mother and son, they have a very overt incestuous relationship with each other. There is nothing hidden about that. They passionately kissing,
like
and
5 minutes in, it's like
5 minutes in, like after you meet them, like immediately they're dancing, kissing, and then like you see them go upstairs, and this pulsing purple light is seen from the windows. And apparently, so this is something that I read in an interview with Mick Garris later on, is that the whole process is this. And this is something you don't really fully find out in the movie. They don't really explain it because they kind of can't. But so as the son, he finds a teen virginal victim and sucks her life force out and through his mouth and through her mouth. And they turn what?
Through their mouths.
Yeah, through their mouths. And so and then the son goes back home and has sex with mom, and that is how he passes on the life force to her. So it's through the act of sex that happens. And so it's kind of like, okay, all right, that's a little weird.
That's
so you can kind of see why they didn't really highlight that too much.
Not on screen.
Yeah.
In a book, you can get away with it a lot more.
Yeah, there's a lot Stephen King's gotten away with in books that's very problematic. So this just seems like one of the this seems
everybody knows it at this point, because that's all anybody talked about when
when the new movies came out. They're like, are they going to put in that scene? Are they going to put in that scene? No, they're not going to put in that scene.
Are you insane?
Nobody wants to see that. Yeah.
This isn't a Harmony Korine movie, Jesus.
So there's this incestuous relationship between the mother and son, and they have and we don't know exactly how old they are, but they seem to be very long lived. Their house has touches of past stuff. They listen to records, and this was the 90s, so it wasn't too far removed from records or anything. But some of their appliances look very old, and so they were definitely going for this thing where they just kind of move all their stuff along as they continue to move from place to place, killing an innocent victim at every place they go. They don't seem to stick around too long in each individual place, because whenever they land somewhere, cats seem to immediately know they're there and start swarming around their house. And they are vulnerable to cats, which is a weird thing for people who are
essentially
like this weird themselves. feline humanoid character. It's like, well, why is a cat something you're vulnerable to? You yourself are part cat.
Yeah, I don't know.
The
Maybe that was
mythology is
something that
not
was on
fully
the
explored.
script, and it was like we have to cut around that. We'll
Yeah.
explain it. We'll try to explain it, but if we can't, just go with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot that doesn't make sense to this movie, but again, this is another one of those those concepts that just seems just fun and weird and just
Yes. Yeah.
works for me, just as a whole. The because the guy, the boy, the son is falling in love with the girl who's his target,
Mhm.
and and he doesn't want to kill her, but he will for his mother because he loves his mother, and it's the only way to keep her alive, and they feel like they're the last two sleepwalkers left. They haven't seen any in a long time. There's just a couple of throwaway lines to that, and so it's very much like they have to keep going because they're the only ones left.
Yeah, this
And
is I mean, the falling in love thing is very interesting. Like it does get kind of lost around that point when the movie changes its tone a little
yeah,
bit, but in those opening moments, I mean, that first scene when Charles, played by Brian Krause, when he first
yeah,
meets Tanya, who played by Matchin Amick, who just, oh my god, the crush I have on Matchin Amick, and especially this, like when I first saw Twin Peaks and everything, I was like, oh my gosh, she's so
yeah.
just cute. But like the
She's a
two
great
of them
actress
just,
too.
oh, absolutely. But the that first scene, like where they meet and they have that little charming, like,
Yeah,
oh, you dropped the popcorn on her accidentally, and this and that, and they're just having this nice little back and forth with one another. And he orders his Coke and medium Mr. Pibb of all of
yeah,
all the drinks. It's like, I want a
yeah,
Mr. Pibb, but this is a Coke town. We
yeah,
don't have Dr. Pepper here. Um, but he's so very charming, and like, and their relationship is so well handled in those early scenes, especially like that. And then the class scene later when he finishes reading his story, and Glenn Shaddix as their teacher is there, just like when she's like, I liked it, you liked it, and she's
yeah,
like, I thought it was different, and she's just kind of giving him, like, looking over at Charles a little bit, and just being like, I thought it was unique, and this and that. It's very like, oh, we're having a big the budding relationship.
yeah.
And
Very high school crush. Yeah,
yeah, and it's just
yeah,
they work so well together. And then the scene, the scene when he takes her home and she's trying to hide all of her underwear in her room
yeah,
is so, like,
yeah,
so adorable. Like, just it's something out of like a teen comedy of sorts, but she's just like running around, and her comic timing in those moments is really really well handled.
yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah, it's just
agree. Yeah,
it works so well. I don't and we mentioned also earlier, Charles's mother, Alice
yeah.
Krige, is
Alice
just,
Krieg. Yeah.
oh my god, she is so good in this movie. Like, if you've
Oh
seen Ghost
man.
Story, you know how well she can, or Star Trek, First Contact, you know how well she can, handle kind of villainous characters like this. And
Oh
she's
yeah.
just like, I kind of love her scenes in the beginning where she's just like, she almost seems so meek, and she's like, "Oh, I need you to do this. I'm starved. And then
Yeah.
later, once Charles, spoiler alert, once Charles dies, essentially,
Yeah.
because as we mentioned, they're susceptible to cats. He gets attacked by a
Yeah.
cat and is basically like, oh my god, I'm dead. Like, and she turns like full, like, the best analogy I could think of, she turns like full Sarah Connor and just starts wrecking this town, like,
Yeah.
just going for
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, she's so good in this, and she's like chewing the scenery after that point, and just in such a great way that you're just like, okay, and,
it.
you said that it turns, there's this middle turn in the movie, and that's there's this sequence where Machen Amick and uh Brian Krause are out at the cemetery doing these grave rubbings and and she's photographing stuff and everything. And so they're doing all this stuff, and then they're trying to make out, or they start making out, and he tries to start sucking her life force out of her, and she panics and freaks out, and then he just straight up doesn't even like, no hesitation, just basically turns into like a huge villain.
Yes.
Like up until then he's been trying to play like the charming guy, and he was doing a great job at it, and so it's like it's this weird like thing. Like I love it because he goes for it. And he does such a great job at it, but it's just such a weird turn too, that he just goes straight up villain. And and he says something about her, just hey, calm down, just think of yourself as lunch. And and
I don't think you're getting in the spirit of things.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
he's turning into, I mean, essentially he's turning into a rapist. But
yeah,
it's,
yeah,
yeah, it's the interesting thing too is like this feels, because there's a scene earlier too where we see the beginnings of like, oh, the monstrous side of these sleepwalkers, because and it happens really fast. But their teacher,
yes,
played by Glenn Shaddix, figures out that Charles has been faking his transcripts and everything like that. He doesn't have any. He hasn't come from Ohio. He's hiding who he really is, and it almost seems
right,
like at that point the teacher wants something sexual from Charles, because he's like, oh, money, money, this, money, that. There's other forms
yeah,
of currency that we can work through, and he rips off his hand, and it turns, I like the way I feel like Stephen King kind of wanted to make like you were saying with Maximum Overdrive being a throwback to like EC Comics. This feels kind of like a throwback to almost like the Universal Monsters a little bit.
yeah,
When you
yeah,
get that scene, you get the hand ripped off, and you get that, oh, you're right, people really should keep their hands to themselves. You get that kind of goofy, like
yeah,
almost a Freddy Krueger, pun. But then the teacher's running through the woods, and it's all these like great shots, like you see like glimpses of Charles as he's chasing after him, and
yeah,
it's like, oh, this feels kind of like the Wolfman or whatever, something
yeah,
from the
yeah,
classic era of monster movies. And yeah, when he makes that turn with Tanya, it's very much like, oh, this is kind of like we're kind of modernizing it, and showing like, well, maybe there was a deeper meaning to those monster
yeah,
movies back when you had the villainous creature is attacking the fine young maiden in the woods. It's like, oh, I'm
yeah,
trying to,
yeah.
this is sexual assault. What are we
Yeah,
talking
that's a
about here?
little
Yeah.
more overt in this than it was in the others, where it's like, yeah, it was played a little bit more chaste, I guess,
Yeah.
in a
A
way,
little coy.
but
It's like,
yeah,
oh, we'll get past the censors this way.
yeah, yeah. And and that's the thing, like you mentioned, like between Charles's interaction with this teacher, then there's that scene where he's driving and gets in this car chase with the cop.
Oh yeah.
um he definitely, he has these villainous turns. It's not like he's fully trying to be this goody two shoes guy, which probably would have made things easier in the long run.
Right.
But he keeps pulling out these like little villainous roles, just for the audience more than anything, to go, okay, this guy is really terrible. He's really kind of a terrible person.
Right, because
It,
you see the scene when he's being chased, and he has that little smirk on his face when
yeah,
he's about to run down the little girl getting off the bus, and it's like,
yeah,
it's that
yeah.
moment where
It's
you're like, oh my god, he did it, and then you see like you cut back, and it's like, oh, the crossing guard rolled her away at the last minute,
yeah.
and then, yeah,
Oh
then the
yeah,
cop stops, and I love the it's so 80 yards the line, but just the one, I think it's supposed to be the crossing guard just going, go get him.
yeah,
It's like, you didn't need to add that. It's okay. He knows to go get him.
yeah, yeah.
But that's also the cool scene with the transformation when Charles sees Clovis, the hero cat
Yes.
of the film, and he does that weird morph into like a small child, and then another
Yeah.
form of the cat creature, then another cat creature. And it's like all in really cool fast motion. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's really neat. Like,
And it
I mean,
it
that's
looks
probably one of the
terrible
most popular
today.
GIFs, but
Yeah. It looks terrible today compared to like, modern CGI and everything. But when this came out, this was only like the second movie to use that after uh uh Terminator 2, that morphine technique. And
and it
so
feels, it feels more, real than this modern CG. I'll say that too. Like it just there's something to it. It's like it's really goofy, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's fun and it adds a weird layer. Like, oh no, human hands sculpted this, not just a computer. Like,
Right. Well, and I think what's good about it too, though, is that because it morphs into, like when it does morph, it morphs into another practical effect. Like when it morphs into their cat face, it's makeup appliance, and then when they morph later on into the movie into their full cat creature, like their melty cat creature, they that's
their
another
hairless
practical suit. That's a full on suit and mask and everything. And so at least with it's digital in service of practical, which is always the better option. I think that where you get to, and don't get me wrong, there's some movies that require like large amounts of digital and you can't get away with that. But a movie like this is always better if you can do as much practical as possible and use CG to help that along.
Yes,
Make that transformation sequence better.
Yeah, when it's just kind of like in small doses, it definitely is like it's more help than hindrance.
Yeah. And that was another thing that the CG that they use in this, they also they go dim. It's a thing that they apparently have a power. These creatures have interesting powers, for being the creatures that vampires are made to, the stories of vampires are made from, that these creatures can go dim, which is basically they can make themselves invisible.
Right.
And
yes.
Charles does that to make himself and his car fully invisible at one point to get away from the cop. He's just like, okay, I've had my fun now. I'm just gonna hide myself, and it almost gets found out by Clovis because the cop stops like right next to him, and the cat can still see him. And
yes.
But apparently not only can they be dim, but they can also not only are they invisible, but they can't be heard either, because he tells the cab, he's like, don't look at me. And and the cop doesn't hear anything. So obviously, he can talk and not be heard as well. So it's weird. So
yeah, and that's another I like the nice little subversion there too of the character Andy, the cop. Because it seems like he's gonna be the hero of the movie, like him and Clovis are gonna be the ones who save the day. And then it's like, well, after Tanya escapes that first attack by Charles by first hitting him with her camera, which like that was so good, and then shoving a corkscrew in his eye, and him going, hey, look at this shirt, my mom's gonna kill me, like those fun moments of like, okay, we've taken that turn. If you've been watching this movie and you're going with it, just you're in for the rest of your time. But she makes a run for it, and she runs into Andy, who spots
the Trans Am,
the car, which also at that time at one point he changes the car.
He changes the car after Andy leaves in the first place, and then he changes his blue Trans Am into a red Mustang. So, and that's the car her and Tanya arrive in at the thing, but his power wanes or whatever because they need to feed, and so the car changes back into it.
And you're like, okay, this is gonna be the moment, like he's gonna like save Tanya and they're gonna get out of there, and it's not the end of the movie just yet, but we're getting close, we're right around there, so it'll be like some cool hero moment, like he's gonna have something, and then it's like, no, Charles is going to shove a pencil through his ear, and then
cop kebab,
and then and he's somehow still alive enough to shoot Charles, and then be like, well, no, you're officially dead. You're gonna die now. Like it's like, but Clovis is still alive, so that's the point that matters most, because we've already established like, oh, the cats are their weakness, and Clovis is Clovis just dives right in and is just like, nope, you killed the guy you killed my partner, essentially. Like I love that when we first meet Andy, he's just sitting in his cop car and he's like, get the perp, Otis, get the perp, and or Clovis, he's got get the perp, and he's just got that one of those sticks with string on it, and he's like, get the perp, and it's like a cute little, like, we don't know where this cat came from. It's not part of the force, but Andy loves this cat just like his own partner, so they're teaming up, and Clovis like saves Tanya, and she gets away, and yeah, I guess essentially Charles he's not dead, but he's basically on death's door for the rest of the movie until
he's in a lot of pain the rest of the movie, and on his way to death. He's definitely dying for sure, and never fully recovers.
His mother she's going for it, like.
We
have all those cops posted, there to protect Tanya, because they're like, she was attacked, and then this cop is dead. Like, what do you guys think? You want to get some police protection? And all of these cops seem to be like Barney Fife level. Like, you get the one cop who's just like, oh well, if you're offering food, I'll take your food. And that's probably one of the best deaths of the whole movie. He's just like Alice Krieg shows up and corn cob right to the back of the back. So
this goes back to what I was going to say earlier about that too, was about Mick Garris. Mick Garris likes doing movies that are called, or what he refers to as, Norman Rockwell from Hell. And so this small town that something crazy or insane happens at. So this definitely plays into a lot of that. This is definitely that kind of movie. This town is very like, just, out of the way, just kind of like, almost kind of country-ish kind of. It's just a small town area.
It feels very like, Midwest. As the teacher puts it, he's like, well, it's Disneyland for cows, but That's one of those lines. Oh, that's a good one. That's a Kingism right there. Like.
So I did want to, I forgot to mention this earlier too. Tanya's parents are played by the same actors who played Ferris Bueller's parents.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think at the time a real couple. They were
a real couple. This was the last movie they did together as a real couple. They met on the set of Ferris Bueller's, got married, had kids, made what's it called? Made Sleepwalkers, and then got divorced. So,
Sleepwalkers ruins another marriage.
Ruined another marriage. Yeah. But
I'm sure they have amazing stories just to tell off this set. Like,
yeah. But we do get at this point where we got the cop hanging out the house who's supposed to be protecting the daughter, who's just sitting down eating dinner with the parents. We and all the other Barney Fife-ish type cops. We get Ron Perlman as a state trooper Soames, badassing his way through everything.
For all of 10 minutes, and then
all of 10 minutes.
It's like, I'm the coolest dude here, and then it's like, no, you're not anymore.
He gets taken out in such spectacular fashion.
Yes, all of these cops are just like, they're annihilated, like nonstop. And we forgot to mention the prior scene too. After Tanya escapes and everything, we get Toby Hooper, Clive Barker, John Landis, and Stephen King. Is there one more? I can't remember.
Well, John Landis and Joe Dante are in another scene, but we get Clive Barker and Toby Hooper at the cemetery with Stephen King playing. Stephen King's the bumbling cemetery caretaker. And he's like complaining. He's like, this is not my fault. I can't, this was locked up. I can't handle when these kids come in and break in and get in my stuff, and he keeps getting pushed along. Like, he's saying this to Toby Hooper, and Toby Hooper's like, don't talk to me, talk to somebody else. And then he walks over and finds Clive Barker, and Clive Barker's like, don't talk to me, go talk to the sheriff. He goes to talk to the sheriff, and the sheriff's like, go away. So it's a great sequence. Good.
Stephen King just like coming in, like, has the briefest of moments on screen, but you're just chuckling because that's the other thing of the omnipresence of Stephen King. You see him in commercials and everything like that. So when you see him in a cameo, it's like, oh, okay, it's Uncle Steve. as he
Yeah,
he calls himself, But yeah, I forgot that is a later scene when we get
Joe Dante and John Landis when they're looking
and
at the pictures.
close friends of Mick Garris again. Joe Dante. I mean, he because I think it's on one of those Masters of Horror, because obviously that led, all these friendships led to them doing those Masters of Horror dinners and then the Masters of Horror show. But they, I mean, early Mick Garris, when he was like a teenager, I think did like a Starlog show, I think, or something like that, where he was interviewing Barbara Steele and Joe Dante. So it was like it's like, oh, we're building up this friendship, early. And I mean, it's one of those, it's not who it's how you know them kind of things. Like,
it's very much he used to do an interview show, I guess throughout the 80s, before he became a director. And so he which very much leads into his own podcast that he does now, Postmortem, where he talks to other filmmakers. He just has continued, like, that is something that he likes doing, and he continues to do to this day. He just enjoys talking to other filmmakers and
that's just
posting that for people to see.
So great.
At the core of it all, he's just a big fan, like we all are.
Yeah, that's that's one of the things I love about Mick Garris. The fact that he wrote Critters 2 is also is another thing. But that's,
and you gotta love him for his luscious long locks as well. He's got some of the greatest long hair.
As a bald man, I'm envious of those just long flowing, just beautiful gray hairs. But yes, it's Alice Krige just comes in, shoves that corn cob into the
corn cob right into the back. Yeah.
And she's getting it on the one-liners now too, and she's just like, no dessert until you finish your vegetables. Like, okay, so this is a family of, like, slasher killers now. We're just the typical Freddy Kruegers and so on. Like, we'll toss out a witty one-liner before or after we kill you, and then but I'm trying to think. She kills Tanya's parents, and then kidnaps.
She kills
Tanya.
The dad for sure. The mom looks like she survives.
But she takes Tanya to hers and Charles' house, which it's a good idea. Like, the house is so kind of out of the way.
Yeah.
Like, very just like, oh, it's in the countryside practically. Nobody's really going to bother you when you're there. Just these cats.
Yeah. Just the 126 cats.
We've been setting out these bear traps for them, and then she's like, that cat just walked right past the trap. He was on the windowsill. Like, and that's one of those moments in the beginning when when Mark Hamill is walking into the one house at their previous location, and it's all those dead cats just completely strung up and everything. It's like, who would do this, Sheriff? He's like, somebody who hates cats. And it's like, like, but we get Charles is trying to suck her life force out, but now it's we're getting into that point when it's like, nope, army of cats now. It's time for the final assault. Like, it's like, you all were expecting a cop to show up. Guess what? Cats everywhere.
Cats literally saved the day in this movie. It is wild.
That's why they're the best creatures. Actually, that's not entirely true. I mean, I love cats. I have a cat. I've had multiple cats in my life. I'm also a dog person, so again, if you had a bunch of dogs, coming in to save the day, it would kind of imagine that.
Be a little weird.
They're sleepwalkers, so they're cat-like, and their one enemy is dogs. It's like,
it
doesn't work. It's not quite the same.
No, I think it works. I think it works pretty well with the cats. It's definitely, it's weird. It's like, why are cats their enemy when they also look like cats? But obviously they're not cats. They just happen to have that look to them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why the cats don't like them, because they're like imitating. They're like, hey, don't look like us.
Yeah, because it all goes back to like ancient Egypt and probably before that as well.
Yeah.
Kind of hieroglyphics in the beginning, and it's like,
okay. Yeah, you get this very weird during the opening credits. You get this sort of history of it as it goes past like hieroglyphics and book pages and pictures and stuff of cat like humanoid creatures and stuff. It's very, this weird mix of vampires and werewolves. It's like that's kind of what Stephen King was trying to do, was this weird mix of this. And but it still works for me.
Oh yeah,
it just yeah,
it's fun.
yeah. And this movie's got okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say this movie's got a couple of good music bits for me as well. Like the score's really nice and everything. But they have this song by Santo and Johnny called Sleepwalk. And they play it throughout the movie, and it's like Charles's favorite song. And it's just an instrumental, and ever since seeing that movie, I've enjoyed that song. I don't know, for some reason I really dig it. And then during the end credits they play Inge's I don't even know how to pronounce it, Bodakai maybe.
Okay, yeah.
That song by Inge has been a favorite of mine ever since then, and I love that on the Scream Factory disc they actually use that song on the menu. So
cool.
Yeah, so that's great for me. I'm always a big fan.
I'm looking up on Wikipedia, and supposedly Mick Garris is considering a sequel to this. So,
well, there've been, so apparently Stephen King's wife Tabitha wrote a sequel to it, which involved a women's sports team of some sort. I'm not sure exactly what. Mick Garris said he wasn't exactly sure what it was fully about when interviewed about it. But he's been mildly interested in, I guess, maybe revisiting it. And yeah, there's been talk of a reboot of some sort. I don't know that you could do a reboot of this. You probably could. You'd have to take some of it out, maybe not all of it, but I think that if you could delve more into the lore of it, I would be interested in that.
You could do this like maybe not necessarily a mini series, but kind of a mini series aspect.
Yeah, like a limited series.
Delve into the history of these, perhaps these specific characters or just the Sleepwalkers in general.
Right.
Like I could see that. And I mean, hey, incest is big now with House of the Dragon, so
yeah, and Game of Thrones in general. Yeah.
It's gonna come back creepy, weird.
Yeah.
Vomit.
No. Yeah. No, Game of Thrones and House of the Dragons kind of made that a little bit more story acceptable. Maybe not
not acceptable
for anything else.
Society, but
but yeah, no, I think they could pull off some kind of reboot or remake of some sort. I definitely don't need it. If they made it, I would watch it. But I'm perfectly fine with just going back and revisiting this one. This one is a favorite of mine. And it has been since it came out. Both of these movies, I've loved both of them since they both came out, and I will sing their praises till my dying day.
That's absolutely understandable. These are two really, really fun King. One's a fun King adaptation. One's just a fun King story that's brought to life in a way.
Yes.
Just like, hey, this was my idea. It's just it was turning in my brain forever. And they're tons of, they're really interesting and different from, I mean, that's kind of the Stephen King thing too, where it's just like he has so many amazing ideas that he just comes, how he pulls these things out of thin air. I will never know, like, and I will always be extremely envious of him for that, where it's just like, yeah, I had this idea about a town besieged by vampires, and then I wrote an amazing book about it. I had this idea about psychics. Oh, and that's a Firestarter, or The Shining, or
The Dead Zone. Yeah,
The Dead Zone, or the new one, The Institute. He's just like, I will die. He just died. He has so many amazing, and I know they always relegate him into Master of Horror, but it's like,
Oh yeah, but he's
man,
so
there's
much more
so
than
many
that.
amazing stories like Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, um,
That's not
even
even going into the Dark Tower, which is my favorite stuff. So,
oh yeah, that was actually Gunslinger is the very first King book I read in its entirety.
oh wow,
Um,
okay.
which was like, and I didn't even know it was part of a huge franchise, which was a funny thing. Like I read it, and then I was like, just ends like that, huh? And then like later on, when I really delved into King, it was like, oh, okay, now I understand, and now I understand how insanely interconnected just about this entire
Everything
universe
is.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, no, I love the Dark Tower and how everything connects in his books and stories and
It
everything.
made
It's
such a
just
great movie.
they need to make a better movie. Yeah.
Oh,
Uh
is Mike Flanagan doing?
Flanagan, yeah, he's gonna do a series, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited
and
for that because um yeah, it needs a good hand on it. It's been passed around. Ron Howard was going to do it for a while. JJ Abrams was going to do it for a while, and then nobody could really get it off the ground. But it looks like Flanagan's going to get to make it at Amazon, which is funny because Amazon had already done um a pilot for a
I
uh
remember seeing the pictures for
yeah.
that because it was going to
And
be mostly the origin from Wizard and Glass,
yeah,
right?
from
Like it
Wizard
was
and
going to be
Glass.
based
Yeah, they
off
were going to go back and do
Butcher
that. And I think that's
and
a mistake going and doing that. Like I heard it's really good. The pilot's really good and everything, but I think you need to make it like you have to start with the gunslinger. And then, you know, just do it in book order in a way to kind of, get guide people through it. I think that's the best way to do
exactly. Yeah,
it.
you could do that story. Yeah, you could do that either the origin,
You can pepper
from
that
the
through
Wizard and Glass.
things.
You either put it in like through flashbacks in some instances,
Yeah.
or that could be its own spin-off series. Like that could
Yeah.
literally just be like that could be this version of House of the Dragon. It's like
Well, because
we're going back.
during Gunslinger, we get flashbacks to his younger years and his how he became the gunslinger. And so, Wizard and Glass kind of follows on that story there. So you can kind of pepper in these stories throughout, and just do these flashbacks throughout the stories that comprise Gunslinger, Drawing of the Three, and the Wastelands.
And
And
yeah, you
then
can
that
show
way,
the
by the
depth.
time we get to Wizard and Glass, you just kind of skip over that and then jump right into Wolves of the Cala. So
Yeah, like you could show the death of his original Katet and things like
yeah,
that, and just everything leading up to it, and just I haven't I kind of want to go back and rewatch The Dark Tower, just like I just out of a bizarre curiosity, like I have it. I bought it
yeah,
at a Redbox on Blu-ray because I was like, you know what, just one day I'm gonna put this in. I remember seeing it in theaters and being like, you know what, it's not my Dark Tower, but it wasn't the worst thing I've seen. But I'm
right,
like,
yeah.
my perspective on it is like, maybe it is the worst thing I've seen. I don't know if I want to go back to. But I loved
It's
Idris Elba. Idris Elba was a great Roland.
oh
Like that
yeah,
was
no, he made a great Roland for sure. It definitely
McConaughey was a
was.
little too broad.
Yeah,
Like he could
yeah,
have been a cool. I think if they would have ever done a live action or a feature movie adaptation of The Stand like they had planned, I think his Randall Flagg
oh, he
would
could
have
be
been
a good
cool.
Randall Flagg. Yeah,
Like he would have been a really like if he took him from Killer Joe and just kind of brought his charm that he has in other things, and kind of bring that romantic comedy charm that he's had and like How to Lose a Guy in
yeah,
10 Days, but then add Killer Joe to it. You have a great Randall
yeah,
Flagg.
yeah,
But I remember reading so many reports when that was initially a movie, The Stand, and it was just like, yeah, it's going to be this crazy like Akira style fight at the end of the like we're going to split it into two movies, and it's going to be this big Akira fight in Las Vegas. And I'm like, that's
yeah. That's not the right way
not
to go, people.
at all still the right way to end that movie. Like, it's a nice meditation on humanity. Like, it has
Yeah.
some really terrifying moments to it. Maybe don't go really big. I mean, you either go that way or you go the way the miniseries ended with a literal giant hand of God
Yeah.
showing. And
Yeah.
I heard how the new one ends in the Vegas part of the new one ends, and I'm like, that's a little bit better, I
Yeah.
guess, but it's still,
It's just, The Stand is one of those ones that works if you, because it's more about the characters. And that's any post-apocalyptic story, I think. Just is you gotta have the character dynamics more than anything else, and everything else is just kind of incidental. Um,
yeah.
but
And
yeah, it's
it's
just,
a hard adaptation to really
it
nail
really
down
is.
unless you have like basically you could make that a multi-series show instead of going mini-series. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
or a multi-season show, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately what they should do with it, is make, a couple of seasons out of it, rather than kind of like, even with the more room they had. I feel like they had more room. There was 9 episodes for this new one. I feel like they had more room, but for some reason they still didn't tell enough story. And so
Mm.
it's just, you're still like, they still cut out a lot of, and you have to. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot you can cut from his stories. But
Yes.
I think that it's one of those things where they cut the wrong things.
Yeah.
So,
That's
and
the
that's what I
biggest.
like about Maximum Overdrive and Sleepwalkers, is that they're not adaptations sure, Maximum Overdrive is a loose adaptation of Trucks, but I feel like it's a wholly original thing. He takes an idea from Trucks and makes it
Yeah.
a new thing. And so and so I think that both of these are really good because they don't go down he's not trying to adapt himself. He's not trying to fit a story that's much bigger into something smaller, and not succeeding at it. And I think that what he does in both of these, he succeeds a lot better than he probably should have. Um, but even with
Yeah.
Maximum Overdrive, as much as Maximum Overdrive didn't succeed, I think as a person who enjoys the movie, I think it succeeds very well.
Absolutely. It succeeds in being entertainment. It's not,
Yeah.
it's I won't say it's a perfect movie. But
No,
it's a
not
movie
at
that
all.
trims a lot of fat from the initial short story is really like we were talking about. The original short story is a more kind of a terrifying idea of like, oh my
Right.
god, humanity's over. Like,
Yeah. What if
machines will
everything
take
did
over.
come alive and try to kill us? Yeah.
Yeah. And instead with Maximum Overdrive, it's just like, no, humanity's gonna survive. We're just
Yeah.
gonna take a lot of crazy. We're gonna take a lot of guns. We're gonna shoot everything.
Yeah.
We're a bunch of people from North Carolina who are just gonna, we're going overboard with all the weaponry,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then a weather satellite from Russia is going to take out a UFO, quote unquote weather satellite. But I love that
Yeah. With
little
lasers and nuclear missiles.
class 4 nuclear missiles. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like I get it. We're wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's having fun. It's having way more fun than the short story would allow it to.
Oh yeah.
And even
Absolutely.
that other adaptation of Trucks itself, where it's like, oh, we're gonna do a way more serious version. It's like, you
Yeah.
guys are just
It's
missing
not
the
gonna
point.
work. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It's such a ridiculous idea to just be like, trucks, they're taking over, they're running. It's like, they're trucks.
Yeah.
I can dive. I'm diving in the water. I'm safe. Like, that thing's gonna
Yeah.
drive into the water and sink. Like, done. Game over. I mean, that's literally what they do. They're like, we get on a boat and go to an island where no technology is, and it's like the end. Like, we
Yeah.
solved
We'll
the
just hang
problem.
out and we'll survive everything. Yeah. We'll
Damn,
just
we
wait it
screwed
out.
up. Yeah, it's like the aliens from Signs. It's like, we planned ahead for everything, except we invaded a planet that is primarily the thing that can kill us. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, it was great talking to you. Let me go ahead and get you to plug your social media and any work you want to tell people about.
Sure. I am at Kevin_U_1987 on Twitter. I have a podcast, Video Confidential. This month, we are working on getting, if we can't get them all, I'm hoping we can get them all, but all of the films in the Leprechaun franchise, because St. Patrick's Day is right around the corner. So God help me, I'm gonna try to watch every single one of those movies. It won't be a gigantic slog, I'll say that. But I also have an article right now out on Neon Splatter for the 30th anniversary of Army of Darkness.
All right.
So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got going on right now. Yeah, that's about it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on and go check out his podcast, Video Confidential. And hope I can get you on again for a future episode.
Oh, absolutely. And doors always open. If you ever want to come on mine, if you want to come on this month, I have a few spots for Leprechaun movies.
That's definitely a franchise that I have not watched yet. I own them all. I just haven't watched any of them yet. So,
well, just prepare yourself. They take themselves some twists and turns, like Sleepwalkers.
Yes, yeah. Well, good to know. Yeah. I'll talk to you about that off air. So, all right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Kevin for joining me. Next week, the first episode in a 4-part series on the Halloween movies begins. Jerry Smith, the composer of the show's new music, joins me for a rare triple feature episode to talk all about Halloween 1 through 3. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by donating to the Ko-fi page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.